The perfectly manicured gardens were a reflection of the lavish life of their owner, a man known not only for his wealth but also for his arrogance. Just crossing the massive wrought iron gates, Laura felt the shift in atmosphere. She knew that once inside those walls, she would become invisible to Isiah and most of the people who lived or visited there. No matter how much effort she put into keeping the place spotless, to Isiah, she was nothing more than an employee, a shadow of no importance, coming and going. Yet Laura, with her calm and patient nature, accepted her reality without complaint. She knew that this job allowed her to put food on her table and to sustain her modest life with dignity. Each day was much like the one before. Laura carried out her duties meticulously, from polishing the vast marble floors to dusting the numerous bookshelves, which she suspected Isiah hadn't even opened. She often overheard comments from other employees about their boss's coldness and lack of interest in the people around him, especially those he considered beneath him. "We're just numbers to him, something he can replace whenever he wants," one of her co-workers would tell her. Late one evening, while Laura was cleaning the main hall, a group of employees gathered near the entrance, whispering excitedly, trying not to be overheard. Their excitement was palpable. "They say Isiah is going to throw a party next weekend, a high-class event with important guests from all over the city," one of them said. Up to that moment, Laura had stayed out of the conversation, but a pang of curiosity struck her. Not wanting to appear nosy, she approached them cautiously. "What's this party going to be like?" she asked softly, almost as if she didn't want to interrupt. The employees turned toward her, surprised at her interest. One of them, with a mocking smile, replied, "It's one of those parties where you won't see people like us. Only the cream of the crop will be there, Laura." Laura felt a slight blush on her cheeks, aware that to many, it was strange for someone like her to show interest in events of that magnitude. But deep down, it was natural for her to want to know more about a world so different from her own. She was fascinated by the thought of what a night surrounded by luxury and such different people would be like, not because she envied their lives, but because, for her, it was like glimpsing into a world of fantasy. From a distance, Isiah observed the scene with his characteristic look of superiority. He had heard Laura's question and noticed the mocking tone in the responses from the other employees. However, instead of being annoyed, a malicious idea began to form in his mind. What if he invited her? Of course, not with the intention of including her in his circle, but to show her in a humiliating way just how out of place she would be at such an event. Masking his irony, he approached Laura and, with a smile as fake as his intentions, he said, "Laura, if you're so interested in the party, you're cordially invited. After all, you might learn something about how real people live." His words, though seemingly polite, hid a poison that few could interpret as well as he could. Isiah had done nothing more than offer her an opportunity to be humiliated in front of his select guests. Laura was left speechless, the unexpected invitation making her feel a mix of excitement and bewilderment. Why would someone like Isiah Ortega want a mere employee to attend one of his exclusive parties? Nevertheless, something inside her was ignited, perhaps the possibility of seeing that world with her own eyes, of experiencing, even if only for one night, what she had only imagined. Seeing Laura's gaze turn distant, Isiah smiled with satisfaction and walked away, leaving the echo of his footsteps on the marble floor. For him, everything was in place. That insignificant employee, whom he saw as unimportant, would have the chance to see how far she was from his level, and he would relish seeing her exposed and out of place before his distinguished guests. As Laura processed what had just happened, her heart raced. She knew she was stepping into unfamiliar territory, but something inside her told her she shouldn't pass up this opportunity, no matter how strange or risky it seemed. With that invitation in hand, she felt that something significant was about to change in her life. The days following Isiah's unexpected invitation flew by for Laura. News of her attendance at the millionaires' exclusive party spread like wildfire among the mansion's staff, sparking various reactions. Some looked at her with pity, convinced that Isiah only wanted to humiliate her, while others were incredulous, unable to comprehend how someone like Laura had been invited to such an important event. For her part, Laura was torn between excitement and fear. Deep down, she knew Isiah hadn't invited her out of respect or appreciation. However, something inside her told her she had to go. Maybe it was an act of courage, or perhaps it was a chance to challenge the expectations others had of her. But the idea of attending this grand party, surrounded by wealthy and elegant people, still intimidated her. She felt a surge of anxiety every time she imagined what it would be like to be there. Her simple, worn work uniform was all she had to wear, and the thought of showing up in it amid the luxurious dresses and fine suits made her feel a mix of laughter and embarrassment. She tried to think of a solution, but time and resources were not on her side. One afternoon, as she finished cleaning Isiah's study, she overheard two of her co-workers talking in the kitchen. "Did you hear that Isiah invited poor Laura to the party?" one of them said with a mocking laugh. The other replied in a whisper, "Oh, yes. Poor woman, she has no idea what she's getting into. Imagine how he'll make her look in front of all those guests." Laura felt a knot form in her throat. She knew that, for many, her presence at the party was nothing more than a source of ridicule, and it hurt her more than she wanted to admit. Yet, she couldn't stop thinking about what attending might mean for her. In a way, it felt like a small victory over the prejudices others had toward her. That night, upon returning home, Laura sat on her bed and let the silence of her small apartment envelop her. Staring at the ceiling, she tried to find answers to the doubts tormenting her. Should she decline the invitation and avoid the humiliation Isiah likely had in store? Or should she accept and face whatever came her way, holding her head high to prove that her dignity didn't depend on others' opinions? As she pondered, an unexpected thought crossed her mind. Denis. She remembered her old friend, who had been like a brother to her during the difficult times of her youth. Denis was now a successful businessman, but he had never lost the humility or kindness he had always shown toward those around him. Laura knew that if anyone could understand what she was going through, it was him. Without a second thought, she picked up her phone and dialed Denis's number. Her friend's familiar voice greeted her on the other end of the line, and within minutes, Laura had told him everything, about the invitation and her doubts. Denis listened in silence, and when she finished, he responded with a warmth that made her feel safe. "Laura, don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. If you want to go to that party, go with your head held high, and don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything," Denis said with determination. Laura, surprised, tried to protest, but Denis insisted. He promised he would help her get ready and be there to support her. Laura could hardly believe what she was hearing, but at the same time, a spark of hope began to ignite within her. Maybe, with Denis's help, she could attend the party without feeling out of place. Grateful and excited, Laura accepted her friend's offer. After hanging up, Laura felt lighter, as if a part of her fears had faded away. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but the thought of having Denis by her side gave her the strength to face whatever might come. With this new determination, Laura decided she wouldn't let Isiah or anyone else make her feel small. The party was no longer just an event, it had become an opportunity to prove her worth and show that, beyond her work uniform, she was a person worthy of respect. Isiah's invitation lingered in Laura's mind as a constant reminder of what could unfold. Every time she thought about the night of the event, she imagined herself walking among rich, elegant people, surrounded by curious stares and fake smiles. It was a world she didn't belong to, and she knew that many of the attendees would probably wonder what she was doing there. However, a spark of pride and courage within her whispered that she had nothing to be ashamed of. For days, Laura reflected on what the party meant to her. Since she was young, she had learned to accept her place in society, to be grateful for the opportunities she had, and to work hard to make a living. She had never felt the need to impress anyone or to fit into a social circle that wasn't hers. But this time was different. Isiah, with his arrogance and disdain, had wanted to humiliate her, and she was determined not to give him that satisfaction. The afternoon before the party, Laura met with her friend Emily, one of the few people at the mansion who had always treated her with respect. While they enjoyed coffee at a small cafe near the mansion, Laura confided her doubts and fears. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Emily. What if this party is just a trap to embarrass me in front of all those strangers? Isiah invited me in such a strange way." Emily, a strong and protective woman, took Laura's hands and gave her an encouraging smile. "Look, Laura, you're a brave woman. Isiah has no right to belittle you. If you want to go to that party, go and show them all that your worth doesn't depend on their money or luxuries." Laura nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Her doubts began to dissipate, replaced by a certainty that took shape within her. She would attend the party, not to please Isiah or to conform to high society standards, but for herself, to prove she was capable of facing any situation without losing her dignity. That same evening, she received a message from Denis confirming that he had arranged everything for her attire. "Everything is ready for tomorrow," the message read. "I'll see you at 7 at the main entrance. Trust me, Laura, it will be an unforgettable night." Excitement and nervousness intertwined within her, but Denis's presence gave her the confidence she needed. He had always been there for her during the most challenging moments, and knowing he would be by her side on this special occasion was a relief. Although Denis hadn't shared any details about his plans for the evening, Laura trusted him completely. The following day, as she prepared to leave her apartment, she paused for a moment in front of the mirror. Her reflection stared back, and for an instant, she saw herself with a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just the image of an employee, there was a strength in her eyes, a determination that reminded her who she was and what she was worth. She promised herself she wouldn't let anyone make her feel less than that. At exactly 7 o'clock, Laura arrived at the mansion's main entrance, where Denis was already waiting. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, exuding a quiet yet powerful elegance, as if every detail of his attire reflected the success and humility that defined him. Seeing her, he greeted her with a warm smile that instantly put her at ease. "Ready to make history tonight?" Denis asked, extending his arm. Laura nodded, taking his arm with a mixture of gratitude and nervousness. "Thank you for being here, Denis. I don't think I could do this without you. That's what friends are for. Now, let's show them that your worth has nothing to do with what they think," Denis replied, guiding her toward the car that would take them to the event. As they traveled to the party, Laura felt her fears slowly dissipating, replaced by a growing sense of security and strength. The drive to the event was brief but filled with thoughts and memories. Laura recalled the difficult times she and Denis had shared when they were struggling to survive on the streets and dreaming of a better future. She could never have imagined that years later, she would be attending a high society party, accompanied by one of the most respected men in the city. But there she was, on the verge of a moment that would change her life forever. Finally, they arrived at the venue, a stunning, modern residence with gardens that looked as though they were pulled from a design magazine. Denis exited the car first and offered his hand to Laura, helping her out with a knowing smile. She took his hand, and as she stood, she felt the weight of her doubts and fears begin to lift. Denis gave her one last look, as if to make sure she was ready, then nodded with approval. "Let's go, Laura. This is your night." With her head held high and her heart racing, Laura crossed the residence's threshold alongside Denis. She knew all eyes would be on her, and though a hint of fear lingered somewhere in her mind, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. This night wasn't about luxury or appearances, it was about proving that her worth went far beyond any preconceived notions. The grand night had arrived, and with it, a blend of excitement and anxiety surged through Laura. As Denis led her to an elegant beauty salon he had reserved exclusively for her, Laura could hardly believe it was all happening. In her mind, she imagined what it would be like to transform herself, to go from being a mere employee to a woman capable of meeting the gaze of those who had once looked down on her. Isiah's invitation, meant to humiliate her, had taken an unexpected turn. Thanks to Denis, she would be able to present herself at the party with dignity. When they arrived at the salon, Denis guided her to the entrance and left temporarily, promising to return to accompany her to the event. "I'll be back in an hour. Trust me, tonight will be a night no one will forget," he said with a wink that made her smile. As she watched Denis walk away, Laura took a step inside the salon and felt the beginning of her transformation. The place was decorated with refined touches, and the luxurious atmosphere was something Laura had never experienced before. The stylists approached her with warmth, preparing everything for her makeover. Laura sat in a chair in front of a large mirror, feeling a mixture of vertigo and excitement. When one of the stylists asked her what style she preferred, Laura simply replied, "Something simple but elegant." The women exchanged a smile and began working on her hair. With each stroke of the brush, Laura watched as a version of herself began to emerge, one she barely recognized but that filled her with pride. As the hairstyling and makeup progressed, she felt a newfound confidence settle in her heart. When they finished with her hair and makeup, the stylists offered her a dress that Denis had specially chosen for her. Laura held it in her hands, feeling the softness of the fabric and admiring the finely embroidered details. It was a classic, elegant gown in a deep shade that complemented her skin and features, yet maintained the simplicity she so valued. Once dressed, Laura looked at herself in the mirror with a mix of awe and admiration. She looked beautiful but also strong, someone ready to face any challenge without losing her essence. In that moment, she felt a kind of rediscovery, as if her entire life had led up to this instant. She knew that the world she was about to enter was one that would judge her for her origins. But now, with her elegant dress and newfound poise, she was ready to show everyone who she truly was. Denis returned just in time, smiling with satisfaction when he saw her new appearance. "You look incredible, Laura," he said, offering her his arm. She, still moved by her own transformation, took his arm with a shy but confident smile. Thanks to Denis, she was about to enter the party not only as a guest but as a person worthy of respect. As they made their way to the event, Denis shared some anecdotes from his life. He spoke about facing people like Isiah on his path to success and how those experiences had strengthened him. Laura listened intently, taking each of her friend's words as a lesson that resonated deeply within her. Denis reminded her that a person's dignity and worth did not depend on their social standing but on their character. Finally, they arrived at Isiah's mansion, where the party was already underway. Lights illuminated the entrance, and a parade of luxury cars came and went as guests arrived. Denis stepped out of the car first and extended his hand to Laura, who took it as her heart raced. She knew that, within seconds, all eyes would be on her. As they crossed the threshold of the mansion, Laura felt silence spread throughout the room. Conversations paused, and every gaze turned toward them. Murmurs and whispers soon followed, and although Laura noticed the surprise and astonishment on the guests' faces, she remained steady, arm in arm with Denis, who guided her calmly through the crowd. Laura spotted Isiah from across the room. He observed her with a mixture of disbelief and disdain. He had expected her to arrive in her humble work attire and without any company, ready to be the center of the guests' mockery. But the sight of Laura in her elegant dress, with Denis's confident presence by her side, struck Isiah with a reality he hadn't anticipated. Though Laura felt the weight of all the stares, she didn't let herself be intimidated. She gently squeezed Denis's arm, who smiled back at her in approval. She knew no words were needed to express how she felt. This night wasn't just about attending a party, it was her moment to demonstrate her worth, to show that she was much more than an employee and that, above all, no one had the right to make her feel inferior. With a confidence she had never experienced before, Laura walked alongside Denis, feeling that each step brought her closer to her own dignity and respect. Isiah, unable to hide his surprise, barely managed to maintain his composure as he watched Laura, a woman he had deemed insignificant, become the center of attention, challenging all his expectations and prejudices. As Laura crossed the room on Denis's arm, she sensed that the murmurs and glances followed her like shadows. The atmosphere was thick with surprise and disbelief. No one could understand how the mansion's humble, reserved employee had turned into a figure worthy of attention and respect. Laura, with her impeccable dress and elegant poise, radiated a confidence she had never shown before. Denis, sharing the same calm elegance, continuously offered her smiles and gentle words of encouragement whenever he noticed any unease in her expression. "Breathe, Laura," he whispered warmly. "You are the star of tonight." She nodded, taking a deep breath to steady the rapid beat of her heart. She knew that many present were watching her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, but this time, she was determined not to let others' opinions define her. All that mattered was staying true to herself and maintaining her dignity. As they mingled, a few guests approached Denis to greet him with respect. Laura listened as they congratulated him on his recent successes and praised his journey from humble beginnings to his high position in society. This made Laura feel even prouder to be by his side. Denis was not only a loyal friend but also someone who, despite his achievements, had never lost his humility or humanity. Isiah, watching from a distance, struggled to mask his discomfort behind an air of indifference. He couldn't avoid throwing disdainful glances in Laura's direction. His plan to humiliate her had taken an unexpected turn. Instead of seeing her subjected to ridicule, he found himself looking at a woman who defied his expectations and broke down the class barriers he had intended to enforce. Each time their eyes met, Laura held his gaze, showing him that she no longer feared his contempt. At one point during the evening, Denis offered her a glass of wine and led her to a quieter corner of the room where they could talk without interruption. "How are you feeling?" he asked, looking at her with genuine interest. After a sigh, Laura responded with a smile, "I feel different. For the first time, I feel like I belong, like I don't have to hide who I am or apologize for my life. Thank you, Denis, for making this possible." Denis took her hand and, in a calm voice, said, "Laura, you've always been worthy of respect, even if others don't see it. Tonight, I want you to realize that true worth lies in being yourself, no matter what others think." As they spoke, one of Isiah's friends, a man with an arrogant demeanor and an inquisitive look, approached them, clearly unable to resist the temptation to find out more about this woman who had caused such a stir. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said with a fake smile, "but I couldn't help noticing you're new to these circles. How did you end up here, dear?" Laura felt a flash of discomfort at the condescending tone, but before she could answer, Denis stepped in. "Laura and I have been friends for many years," he explained firmly. "We've been through a lot together, and tonight, I wanted her to join me because no one deserves this place more than she does." The man, surprised by Denis's direct response, withdrew without another word. Laura, grateful for her friend's support, gave him a smile full of gratitude. Every word, every gesture from Denis reminded her that she had every right to be there, to be treated with the same respect as anyone else in the room. Soon after, the guests' attention began to shift toward Denis and Laura. Some asked about their friendship, intrigued by the story they shared. Laura, initially reserved, gained confidence as she recalled the difficult times she and Denis had endured together. She spoke humbly about how they had met as teenagers, both fighting to get ahead in adverse circumstances. That night, the room filled with luxury and opulence heard a story rarely told in such circles, a story of perseverance, loyalty, and resilience. As the anecdotes continued, the guests began to see Laura in a new light. She was no longer just an employee but a woman who, despite life's challenges, had maintained her dignity intact. Isiah, watching from afar, felt a growing discomfort as he witnessed how Laura earned the admiration of those he considered his peers. The minutes passed, and Laura felt increasingly at peace with herself. Around her, the atmosphere had transformed, the mocking whispers had vanished, replaced by words of respect and recognition. Those who had initially looked down on her now regarded her with a blend of admiration and surprise. Denis, noticing the change in the room, smiled with satisfaction. He knew that tonight had made a difference in Laura's life and in the perceptions of everyone there. When he looked at his friend, he knew he had fulfilled his purpose, giving her the place she deserved, not just in their eyes, but in her own. The night continued, and although Laura knew there were still challenges to face, she felt she had taken a significant step towards self-acceptance. That party, intended to humiliate her, had become a celebration of her worth and the strength she carried within. With each step she took alongside Denis, Laura felt her confidence grow. The elegance of the dress, the steadiness of her friend's presence, and the surprise in the guests' faces reminded her that this night was hers. At first, the discomfort of being the center of attention had unsettled her, but now she began to feel at peace with her place at the event. The soft background music and the warm lights illuminating the room created an almost magical atmosphere. As they moved among the guests, Denis introduced her to several prominent members of society. Initially, Laura limited herself to nodding and smiling without knowing exactly how to behave, but with time, and thanks to Denis's support, she began to open up and share small anecdotes. She surprised herself, becoming more open than usual, talking about trivial matters that, in that moment, connected her with those strangers who were starting to see her with respect. Soon, questions about her life became inevitable. An elderly woman, adorned with jewelry that sparkled under the room's lights, asked her in a kind but curious voice, "Dear, how did you come to know someone as successful as Denis? It's rare to see someone so humble at these types of events." Laura felt the weight of the question, but Denis, always attentive, responded before she had to. "Laura and I have known each other for many years. We helped each other when we were young, and although our lives took different paths, friendship and loyalty always kept us together." The woman, impressed by Denis's response, nodded and smiled warmly at Laura, who returned the gesture with gratitude. She knew that Denis's words were sincere, and within her, she felt a warmth that made her forget the doubtful and judgmental looks she had felt upon arriving. Now, she was just another guest, a person worthy of respect, and Denis ensured she felt that in every moment. Before long, whispers began to circulate among the guests. Laura's presence had not only sparked curiosity but also admiration. The story of a humble woman who was a close friend of one of the country's most respected businessmen had captured the attention of many. Laura could see the looks of approval and surprise, and though she felt a bit overwhelmed at first, she soon began to enjoy the moment. Meanwhile, Isiah observed everything from a corner of the room, struggling to maintain his composure. His plan to ridicule Laura had completely backfired. Instead of seeing her belittled, he now watched as she gained the respect of the very elite he had wanted to impress. The comments he overheard around him were not mere compliments, they were expressions of genuine respect for Laura's humility and dignity, qualities Isiah had never valued. Finally, unable to bear the turn of events any longer, Isiah began to walk toward Laura and Denis. As he approached, the guests sensed the tension in his expression and fell silent, looking on with anticipation. Denis, always vigilant, noticed Isiah's approach and prepared himself for whatever might happen. "So, Laura," Isiah began, trying to mask his anger, "I see you decided to come tonight. I hope you're enjoying yourself, because it's not every day that you get the chance to attend an event like this, is it?" His tone was laced with irony, but Laura, inspired by Denis's steady presence, responded calmly. "Yes, Isiah, I'm enjoying the night very much. More than anything, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. It's an interesting environment." Feeling challenged by her calm response, Isiah continued in a mocking tone. "I imagine this must be quite different from your day-to-day life. After all, it's not common to see someone of your situation at an event like this." Before Laura could respond, Denis intervened, looking directly at Isiah. "The real difference doesn't lie in where we come from, Isiah, but in how we choose to see and treat others. Laura is here tonight not because of her social or economic standing but because she deserves the same respect as anyone in this room." Denis's statement echoed through the room, and several guests nodded silently, impressed by his words. Isiah, however, was not ready to back down. "Respect?" he scoffed, with a sarcastic smile. "Respect is earned, Denis, and I'm not sure a simple employee truly understands what it means to be in an environment like this." Laura felt the sting of Isiah's words, but she remained resolute. She knew this was Isiah's last attempt to make her feel small, and she wasn't willing to give him that power. In a steady voice, she replied, "Respect, Isiah, is shown in how we treat others, regardless of where they come from. At the end of the day, we are all equal, and differences should not be used as an excuse to look down on others." Her response left Isiah speechless, and for a moment, the entire room fell silent. The guests, who at the beginning of the night had looked at her with skepticism, now observed her with respect and admiration. Laura had demonstrated a dignity that many in that room lacked, and her ability to respond with calmness and strength made it clear that her worth did not rely on anyone's approval. One of the guests, a sophisticated-looking woman, approached Laura and congratulated her. "You're absolutely right, Laura. It shouldn't matter where we come from but how we conduct ourselves. Thank you for reminding us of that tonight." The woman's words prompted others to express their support. Some approached to greet Laura and Denis, sharing words of appreciation and respect. Isiah, seeing the situation slipping further from his control, tried to regain his composure, but the tide had shifted. Laura was no longer just an employee in the eyes of the others, she was a woman who had earned everyone's respect. Denis, watching the guests' reaction, smiled at Laura approvingly. "You did it, my friend. You showed everyone who you really are." Isiah, feeling increasingly isolated, tried to say something, but an older man among the guests interrupted him. "Isiah, tonight you have given us an important lesson. Sometimes, true elegance doesn't come from appearances or wealth but from character and dignity. Perhaps you should reflect on that." The humiliation on Isiah's face was evident, and without saying another word, he stepped aside, leaving Laura and Denis at the center of attention. For him, the night had turned into a disaster, and the lesson he had tried to teach Laura had backfired. Laura, seeing Isiah walk away, felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. She had faced the man who tried to humiliate her and, without losing her dignity, had earned the respect of everyone. She knew that, from this night forward, her life would not be the same, not because of the praise or recognition of high society, but because she had proven to herself, and to others, that her worth wasn't defined by her origins or social position. As the soft music continued to fill the room, Laura took a deep breath, absorbing everything that had just happened. She had faced Isiah with a calm and strength she hadn't known she possessed. But most remarkable was the reaction of the guests, who, instead of supporting him, had rallied around her, looking at her with newfound respect. Denis, always by her side, gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and smiled proudly. "See, Laura. This is the real power, not wealth or social status, but staying true to yourself." Laura nodded, grateful for his support. The night, which had begun as an attempt to humiliate her, now felt like a moment of vindication. Each glance, each word of encouragement she received from the guests made her feel that her worth was recognized for what it truly was, without the need to hide behind appearances. One of the women who had observed the confrontation with Isiah approached Laura with a friendly smile. "Laura, I must say, you have impressed me. It's rare to see someone in these circles who stays so authentic. How do you know Denis? I'd love to hear your story." Hearing the question, Laura exchanged a knowing look with Denis, who nodded, encouraging her to share her story. Though still a bit nervous, she felt more confident in the company of those around her. She began to recount how they had met in a difficult time for both of them, a moment in their lives that had bound them together. "Denis and I met when we were very young," Laura began, capturing everyone's attention. "We both came from humble backgrounds, and we shared many challenges. We lived in the same neighborhood, and we always supported each other, even when Denis dreamed of a better future. He was always there to help me, no matter his own problems." The guests listened attentively, surprised by the simplicity and sincerity of her words. Denis, with a nostalgic smile, added, "Yes, I remember that Laura always had a kind word for me when things got tough. She gave me the push I needed to study and work hard. Without her friendship, I wouldn't be where I am today." Denis's words resonated with those present, who began to see Laura in a new light. Now, she was not only a dignified and strong woman but someone whose friendship and generosity had helped Denis achieve his goals. An older man, who had remained silent until then, approached and commented, "Not many people in these circles can speak of friendship and loyalty like that. I think, without knowing it, Laura and Denis have reminded us of the true value of humanity." The guests nodded, and several of them came forward to congratulate Laura and Denis. The atmosphere filled with camaraderie and respect. Laura felt as if the weight of her long-held insecurities was slowly lifting. That night had not only been a test to prove her worth to others but also an opportunity to recognize it within herself. However, amidst the celebration, an unexpected thought crossed Laura's mind. What would her life be like after this night? The party would end, and she would return to her routine at Isiah's mansion, dealing with the disdain and arrogance of someone who saw her as less. But for the first time, a small spark of hope ignited within her. Perhaps she wouldn't have to endure that situation any longer, perhaps she had found the strength she needed to open herself to new possibilities. As if sensing her thoughts, Denis leaned close and whispered, "Laura, tonight is only the beginning. There are many opportunities out there, and I know you'll find your way. You don't have to settle for what others decide for you." Denis's words resonated in her heart, filling her with gratitude and hope. Laura knew he was right. She had spent too much time accepting her situation without question, believing it was the only life she could have. But now, with the respect and support of those around her, she felt she had the strength to change her fate. In that moment, one of the guests raised their glass and proposed a toast in honor of Laura and Denis. "To true friendship and the dignity that reminds us all that we deserve respect," he said, lifting his glass. The guests joined the toast, and Laura, moved, raised her glass along with them. The applause that followed made Laura feel truly at peace with herself. She had crossed an invisible line, leaving behind the insecurity she had carried for so long. Isiah, who was watching from afar, felt as though the night was slipping out of his control. Not only had he lost his hold over Laura, but she had earned the admiration of all those he had tried to impress. With one last defiant look at Isiah, Laura realized she had finally reclaimed her dignity. Surrounded by people who valued humility and respect, she had broken free from the invisible chains of prejudice that had once kept her bound. As the night came to an end and guests began to say their goodbyes, Laura felt overwhelmed by the gratitude and recognition she received. She knew that her life would not be the same after this night, that something had changed profoundly within her. Denis, always by her side, gave her one last smile, silently reminding her that the power over her life was now in her own hands. Throughout the evening, Laura sensed that the weight of judgment and criticism had transformed into something positive. The acceptance and respect from those around her gave her a newfound sense of confidence. However, what she couldn't imagine was that this event would soon surprise her in a way that would change her life forever. Denis, who had been by her side all night, appeared somewhat thoughtful. Laura noticed his quiet gestures and the deep, searching looks he gave her every so often. At first, she thought he might be worried about some work matter or something related to the party, but her intuition told her there was more behind his expression. Finally, after exchanging smiles with some of the guests who were leaving, Denis took Laura's hand with a gentleness that made her pause. He looked at her with an intensity she had never seen before. Without saying a word, he led her to the center of the room, where everyone could see them. Intrigued, the guests gathered around in silence, wondering what was about to happen. "Nervous, Denis?" she whispered, her voice full of emotion. With a calm smile, Denis replied, "This moment has been in the making for a long time." And then, in a clear, firm voice, he addressed everyone, saying, "Tonight has been a special occasion for me, not only because I could share it with all of you, but because I had the honor of being by the side of an incredible woman. Someone who has been my friend and inspiration for many years. Laura's cheeks flushed with emotion as Denis spoke. Although their friendship had been one of the most solid foundations of her life, she had never imagined he would speak about her like this in public. But Denis continued, determined to make the moment last. "Laura," he said, looking deeply into her eyes, "tonight, I don't just want to celebrate our friendship and what we've lived through together, but also what I hope we'll live through from now on. Because for me, there is no one more deserving of my respect, admiration, and love." Then, Denis knelt down, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Gasps and murmurs of surprise echoed through the room as Laura looked at him, barely able to believe what was happening. With a tenderness that only he could express, Denis opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring that gleamed in the soft light of the room. "Laura, will you marry me?" he asked, with a smile that reflected all the sincerity and love he felt for her. The surprise left Laura speechless. She looked at the ring, then at Denis, trying to process what was happening. The years of friendship, support, and companionship all converged in this moment, giving it a meaning she had never anticipated. Everything that had happened that night, all the respect and dignity she had earned, now culminated in a proposal of sincere love, something she had always thought was out of her reach. The guests watched in silence, waiting expectantly as Laura searched for the words to respond. Finally, through tears of joy and with a smile she couldn't contain, she nodded and whispered, "Yes, Denis. I accept." The room erupted in applause as guests came forward to congratulate them. Denis, filled with joy, stood up and embraced Laura tightly, as if he wanted to protect her from anything that could harm her. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, and the love and respect they felt for each other became evident to everyone present. Still overwhelmed with emotion, Laura could hardly believe what had just happened. The woman who had arrived at the party feeling like an outsider, a mere employee ready to be humiliated, was now engaged to a man who loved and respected her for who she truly was. That night, the world she had once considered out of reach now seemed to lie at her feet, and she knew that Denis would be by her side to face whatever came their way. Surrounded by hugs and congratulations, Laura realized her life had changed in a way she had never imagined. She had found not only the respect and recognition of others but also true love. As she let herself be carried by the joy of the moment, she looked at Denis and knew that, no matter what the future held, they would always be together. Isiah, on the other hand, watched from a corner, feeling a mix of regret and shame. The night he had planned as a humiliation for Laura had turned into a moment of love and triumph. Seeing the happiness on her face, he felt a pang of loneliness and realized that, in his arrogance and disdain, he had missed out on something genuine and beautiful. As the night drew to a close, Laura understood that she had gained more than she had expected: others' respect, her own dignity, and true love. She was ready to face anything the future might bring, knowing that from that moment on, she was no longer alone. As the celebration continued in the hall, guests came up one by one to congratulate Laura and Denis on their engagement. The night, which had begun as an attempt to humiliate Laura, had transformed into a tribute to her dignity, strength, and the love she had found with Denis. Amidst the joyful atmosphere, someone remained in silence, lost in dark thoughts: Isiah. From a corner of the room, Isiah watched the scene, feeling a mix of confusion and regret. The situation had spiraled out of his control in a way he had never anticipated. For him, the party had been an opportunity to assert his power and authority, to draw a clear line between himself, the wealthy, arrogant mansion owner, and Laura, the mere employee he saw as insignificant. But now, that very employee had shown a strength and dignity he, despite all his wealth, did not possess. Isiah tried to ignore the murmurs and comments around him. The guests who noticed his distant attitude began to question his behavior. Some looked at him with disapproval, others with surprise, as if they were only now beginning to see the true face of the evening's host. For Isiah, the mounting pressure of the guests' critical glances and whispers felt like an unbearable weight he didn't know how to handle. As he observed Denis and Laura surrounded by people who celebrated them, Isiah remembered moments in his own life that he had kept buried in his memory. His childhood, marked by the constant need to prove his worth, had instilled in him the belief that money and power were the only means of gaining respect. He had spent years building an image of a successful, powerful man, willing to step on anyone in his path. Yet that night, that image felt fragile and insignificant. In a rare moment of reflection, Isiah recalled his own humble beginnings and the determination that had driven him to accumulate wealth. He realized he had started his life with the same dreams and aspirations as Denis and Laura. The difference was that, somewhere along the way, he had allowed ambition and disdain to blind him, transforming him into a person incapable of seeing others' worth. While Laura found love and respect in the eyes of those around her, Isiah faced a loneliness he had built for himself. Suddenly, an old family friend approached him, noticing his absent and melancholic expression. "Isiah," the man began in a soft voice, "tonight, it seems you've learned an important lesson. True wealth isn't in money or power but in how we treat others. Perhaps it's time to think about what kind of legacy you really want to leave." The friend's words struck a chord within Isiah, and he felt a knot in his stomach. He knew his friend was right. But to accept that truth meant facing the mistakes and decisions that had led him to lose what mattered most, the genuine connection with others. He looked toward the center of the room, where Laura and Denis continued to receive congratulations, and realized that the respect and love they shared couldn't be bought or commanded. Gradually, the resentment and arrogance that usually defined Isiah began to fade, replaced by a feeling of shame and regret. In silence, he acknowledged that despite his wealth and status, he was the one who truly needed to learn a lesson in humility. With a deep sigh, Isiah gathered the courage to approach the couple. As he neared, Laura and Denis exchanged a look of surprise, but also of curiosity. The guests nearby fell silent, watching expectantly to see what Isiah would say. With a serious, subdued expression, he looked at Laura and spoke with a sincerity he rarely showed. "Laura, I know I acted despicably tonight. My intention in inviting you was only to make you feel inferior, and now I realize how wrong I was. In the end, you've taught me a lesson about a person's true value." With her characteristic humility, Laura nodded silently, listening without resentment. Isiah continued, addressing Denis as well. "I see now that the respect and love you share aren't dependent on social or economic status. I've been blinded by my own insecurities and my need for control, and that's led me to become someone I don't even respect." Denis, with his usual calm, replied, "What matters is that you recognize your mistakes, Isiah. It's not easy to admit we've failed, but every step toward humility is a step toward true strength." The guests, witnessing the scene, exchanged approving glances, admiring Isiah's courage to face his errors and Denis and Laura's generosity in listening without resentment. In that moment, Isiah felt he had taken the first step towards something he didn't fully understand, but he sensed it would be the beginning of a profound transformation. After the conversation ended, Isiah stepped away silently, leaving Laura and Denis in the center of attention. He felt as if he had left behind a part of himself he no longer wanted to carry. For the first time, he understood that his life didn't have to revolve around power or control but rather around building authentic, meaningful relationships. As he exited the hall, the echo of Denis's words resonated in his mind, reminding him that it was never too late to change. That night, he had lost the respect of others but gained the opportunity to redeem his soul. With the celebration winding down, the guests began to say their goodbyes, and the mansion gradually emptied, leaving behind the echoes of an evening that would undoubtedly remain in everyone's memory. The story of Laura and Denis, their strength and love, as well as Isiah's unexpected reflection, had left a mark on every guest. Laura, still moved by the engagement and everything that had happened, looked around the nearly empty room. Her life had changed in one night in ways she could barely comprehend. She had arrived at the event with a mixture of fear and insecurity. But now, as the night ended, she felt she had found a new version of herself, one that was unashamed of her origins or her work but carried them as symbols of dignity. Denis, always by her side, gave her a warm look and gently took her hand. "Tonight was only the beginning, Laura. Now, you have everyone's respect, but most importantly, you respect yourself. That's what truly matters." Laura smiled, squeezing his hand softly. "Thank you, Denis. Thank you for being by my side and reminding me who I am. Without you, I don't know if I would have had the courage to face all this." The two exchanged a glance filled with promises and shared dreams. Both knew that their engagement was not just a celebration of their love but also a symbol of their journey, their humble beginnings, and the unconditional support they had always given each other. Hand in hand with Denis, Laura felt she had found something much greater than the respect of others. She had found true love and a life full of meaning. In that moment, one of the last guests, the older friend of Isiah, approached with a kind smile. "Laura, Denis, I want to congratulate you once again. Tonight, you have given us all a lesson in humility and greatness that we won't forget. I hope you find all the happiness you both deserve." Moved, Laura thanked him with a respectful gesture, and Denis responded with a firm handshake. The man's words seemed to seal the night with a message of respect and admiration, as if each person there had learned something about the true value of human relationships. As the last guests departed, Laura and Denis stood in the center of the room, feeling the night end but a new chapter beginning. Everything they had experienced gave them the strength to face the future with confidence, no matter the challenges that might come. As for Isiah, who had left the room silently, his presence in the mansion felt like a distant echo. Laura and Denis knew that the night had left a deep mark on him. Though it was uncertain if Isiah would truly change, they understood that his reflection and regret were the first steps toward a more authentic life. Finally, as the mansion emptied and silence filled the hall, Denis looked at Laura with a smile full of tenderness. "Ready to begin this new life?" he asked. Laura, with renewed emotion, nodded and replied, "More than ever. With you, I know anything is possible." Together, they walked toward the mansion's exit, leaving behind a night that had transformed their lives. As they crossed the threshold, Laura felt she was not only leaving behind the insecurities and fears that had followed her for so long but also opening a door to a future full of possibilities. Out in the open air, the city lights shone in the distance, a reminder of everything that still awaited them. Denis looked at her once more, and they exchanged one final smile, knowing that from that night forward, nothing would ever be the same. Laura, who had arrived at Isiah's mansion as a simple employee, now left as an empowered woman, confident in her own worth and surrounded by the respect and love of those who truly mattered. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she no longer feared facing them. With Denis by her side and a new vision of herself, she was ready to build a life full of dignity, respect, and happiness.